All right, so let's go. Who's going to get us started?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Alan.
Hi.
Welcome. If you are comfortable, we'd love to see your face, but if you want to stay without camera, that is fine as well. Coach Kruse just came on. All right, we're doing an introductions. We're going to do names, organization you're representing, and then favorite moment in history that you like to study or learn.
I'll go first.
Or like person or thing. It's pretty broad, but.
So hey everyone, I'm Ernest Levert with Lead the Way Learning Academy. And most recently, I was doing a lot of studying about the civil rights movement and kind of the unknown, kind of really digging into the details of the civil rights movement and the non-public version, non-holiday version. So that's been really interesting for me, especially here in Columbus. Like, what were people doing in Columbus during that time?
Okay, can I go?
I'm gonna pass it to
I'll go.
Trinity.
Ariana asked to go.
Okay, I'll pass it to Ariana.
Okay, I just wanted to go because that connects to something I was gonna say. So my name is Ariana. I'm an AM coach at Impact Community Action. And what you said connects to what I was gonna say because I actually wrote a research paper in grad school about the unsung heroes of the civil rights movement, mainly in the Black Panther Party. So all the women, that's who it was. All the women. So that's it.
Awesome. You want to hand it off, Ariana?
Trinity?
Oh, okay. I'm Trinity. I'm a student with Lead the Way, and I intern at the library. So, one of my favorite things to learn about in history actually is like romanticism, literature. And I'm like reviewing some things right now with that, and I think it's pretty interesting. I'll hand it off to Amal.
Hey y'all, my name is Amal. I'm an AM coach with Lead the Way. Favorite moment in history? It's weird because a couple years ago when I was, well, more than a couple, I guess, but when I was in like middle school, I think it was, or elementary, I don't remember what it was. I learned about Pearl Harbor and there was a movie that came up. And so I have a weird, maybe not weird, but that was like the one moment in history that really stuck with me. I'm not much of a history, maybe not fan. I shouldn't say fan because, you know, we're all made of history, but yeah, history wasn't my favorite subject. But that moment stuck with me. And I think it's because I had to do this whole project on Pearl Harbor and all that kind of stuff.
Oh.
We see Donovan's face.
Hey, Donovan! I'm gonna pass it to you. Donovan, we can't hear you. Well, I can't.
Boo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
It might be, Donovan, it might be your mic.
Yeah, I think
or your headphones.
or the headphones.
We will be back. So.
Was that Alan?
Alan, we hear all your great, what's it called, sound effects. Oh no, Donovan said he'll come back.
Okay, maybe Alan can go?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Your name, organization you're representing, and your favorite moment in history or thing to learn about, study.
I'm representing Lead the Way. Word. My name's Alan. Yeah. I'm an artist. There you go. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, well, you've talked to me a lot about art history.
Well, Yeah.
So even like in comics and cartoons, more specifically.
Okay. I go through like cartoon history. Okay. My first cartoon I really liked was Popeye the Sailor Man.
So that actually depicts a lot of history during that time. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I like the black and white pictures of it.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Alan. And when we are not talking, let's go ahead and mute our mics so that way we don't have any background noise or interference.
Yeah.
And something really cool while we kind of run through these introductions here soon is, and feel free, there's a lot of different options in Zoom. So there's a chat box, and so it actually has the introduction in chat. So if you want to go ahead and put your introduction in there, that works as well. You can also raise your hand. There will be times where we'll put that was good, Alan. I'm glad we see your face. There will be times where you can put a green check mark for yes or a red X for no. There's different thumbs up, hand clap, different options like that. And for those of you joining in from your phone, there is a really cool option where you can have a virtual background. For those of you that came on a little earlier, you saw I was in Indonesia on a resort somewhere. And so you can actually have a whole virtual background if you'd like. It's under options on the bottom of your screen for your phone. I know for a fact. I haven't seen it done on a desktop. But anybody else going to either put their introduction in the chat or want to say it out loud? Let's see, what other youth do we have on the call?
I was gonna ask Alan something real quick. Alan, have you heard of the Billy Ireland Cartoon Museum and Library at OSU? Have you ever been there? We can't hear you if you're talking.
My bad. I said no, I haven't, but I heard about it.
It's small, but it's so cool. You should tour it if you have time. At least after the quarantine's over.
Yeah, I watched it like after quarantine.
Or maybe it's one of the ones that's on the virtual tour. Even there.
What? I'll check and see.
Yeah. Let's see. We have Caroline in the chat. She said she's part of Lead the Way. Preferred moments of history, learning about our Tulsa race riot in 1921. And I don't know how to say it.
Black Panther Caroline.
Miss Caroline, can you pronounce the name for me? Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else want to go? Sure.
Oh, I'll go.
Okay.
My name is T. Asia. I don't know if y'all can see me.
Hey, T. Asia.
How you doing? I'm an M coach with Impact, and my favorite moment in history is the music from like slavery to present, because I feel like music can speak to us in like a different multitude of ways. Like when you're going through something, like music's been getting me through the quarantine, so that's like my favorite moment.
That's dope. Thank you.
All right, I'll go if it's cool. Jessica would lead the way, M Coach would lead the way. I'm like Amal, where if I'm thinking just technical history, I'm not a big fan because my mind will go, to be honest, directly to slavery if I'm thinking how I was taught history formally. So I'm not the hugest fan. But if I'm taught something that is history, I like to learn organically through maybe a book that someone has written. So I'm not opposed to history, but I like to be introduced to it in an organic manner. I'm not the one to typically seek it out unless, like Tiasia, I don't have a specific time in history, but I like music history. That's something that I will myself go look into and go seek and try to find and deeper into.
Thank you. Carzel?
Hi, my name is Carzel. I'm part of Lead the Way, and my favorite part of history is the Harlem Renaissance.
Yes. So nice. Greg introduced himself in the comments. He said he's a part of Lead the Way Learning Academy and said that his favorite thing currently is learning about the formation of the United States. And Shanitha from Impact is an AMP coach, said that she loves learning about the history of African Americans and voting rights. Nancy from Impact is here with us. She said she loves learning about professional athletes and their grassroots beginnings. Super, that's so dope. I would never have thought to answer the question like that, so that's really cool. Okay. Anybody else that wants to introduce themselves?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me?
I can hear you. I don't know where it's coming from.
It's Chris from
okay. Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm Chris from Lead the Way Learning Academy. I'm an AMP coach. My favorite part, one of my favorite parts of history is like the Roman gladiators. I really get a kick out of the fact that people would watch kind of like people go fight to the death with animals and other people in like big arenas like we do with football. I find it interesting.
Wow, cool. In the comments, Elizabeth, who was an AMP coach with Impact, said that she loved learning about the 1800s and how we lived in those days. So super cool. I'm gonna just go real quick if nobody else wants to. I'm Tiandra with Lead the Way Learning Academy, and the last few people that I've learned about that I've really enjoyed is I just finished reading Angela Davis's autobiography, and so the whole time I was reading it, I was waiting for confirmation of like the fact that she did this really bad thing or this horrible thing, which is why history views her the way that she does, or that would make sense based off of what I learned. And I remember reading like what she got in trouble for, the law, and I'm like, really? Like that was it? And how much she did that was positive just for the world and her outlook. So learning about her, learning about Assata Shakur, Malcolm X, like all these people that have a bad rap, and then you dig deeper into who they are, and you're like, these people are really dope. So reading, like Coach Jessica was saying, especially from somebody's perspective, it gives you the option or like the full picture to be able to decipher between your internal compass, like maybe where they stand in your opinion, as opposed to being taught somebody else's opinion. So that's the coolest thing that I've found about history as of late. Yeah, I'm actually gonna have our speaker do his favorite moment in history. So Josh Kruse is with us from Ohio History Connection, or the Ohio History Village with Ohio History Museum. And he will be interviewed today based off of his experience working in the museum industry. And I'm very curious what Josh has to say about this answer.
So yes, I'm the village coordinator at the Ohio History Center. The thing I'm most interested in right now, probably not my favorite, but most interested right now, I'm reading a lot about the Native American removal policies and like how all of that happened, and how some of that's even still happening today. We have a tribe this week that was published saying, hey, they're trying to take our 300 acres away in Massachusetts. So like how still things that happened what we thought were 200 years ago are still happening today, and the fights that they're going through. So that's a lot of reading has happened on that. We're developing some programming at work for that to talk about removal, because that's one of those subjects that people don't really want to talk about, the overall whitewashing of history. It's the history of the winners, not really the history of all people typically. So yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, just to set precedence for today, with Lead the Way Learning Academy, we do professional development on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at 1, and leadership development on Tuesday, Thursdays at 3. And so we're always somewhere virtually, whether it be on Instagram Live or here on Zoom. And we want to thank you all for being here. Today, our interviewer is Trinity Brown. She is a student with Lead the Way Learning Academy through the AMP program. She is very interested in pursuing a career in library science. She's done a couple stints of her internship with the Columbus Metropolitan Library System, and she is just a great young lady all the way around. She loves the Beatles and Doors and has a record player, and so she'll be facilitating this interview. As you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will work your questions in and make sure that they get answered. We will we will complete this promptly at 2. So for the next 20 minutes, Trinity and Josh are going to have a conversation. As questions arise, please make sure you put them in the chat, and then we'll work them in at the end. Yeah. Thank you guys for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to mute my mic. So Trinity, if you'd like to go ahead and start your interview.
Hello.
Hi, Trinity.
How are you doing?
I'm good. So you want to be in library science. Do you know
Yes.
kind of what you want to do with library science, or because there's a whole swath of library science options?
Yeah. I mostly have been dealing with like shelving and stuff like that. Sorry, my cat's messing with the record.
So more just the collections of it. Yeah, because that can range from anywhere from like elementary school librarian to my mom's a medical librarian at a medical research lab, and they're working on coronavirus vaccine right now. So it's
Yeah.
a whole swath of what you can do in library. So that's really cool.
Sorry, my cousin's playing her recorder right now. One of the questions that I had for you was, what are some of the like biggest challenges in your career?
Okay. So I work a lot with volunteers. And so one of the biggest challenges I have right now is the entire like shift in what volunteerism is right now. It used to be you would have people show up one day a week, and that's the day they volunteered, and they would volunteer at the same location for 10, 15, 20, sometimes even 30 years. And so every Thursday you had an expectation that, an example of a name I've worked with, Avis, who's now 93 and still shows up to the museum every single week that she can. And that's just something she's been doing for 20, 30 years. Well, that's shifting now. People are working longer, and they're waiting, and volunteering is more just like popping in and popping out of volunteering. People don't have the ability to commit to a location for long term.
Yeah.
But they also, a lot of the people who are volunteering now, they want younger people to come in and volunteer so they can see that the organization is going to stay stable and going to continue. But how many of y'all have a lot of time to go spend one full day a week to go hang out and volunteer at a place?
Right.
So that's the changing faces of volunteerism, and how do we as organizations work with our volunteers? How do we engage our volunteers? That's a big challenge that's happening recently that we've been kind of having to work through and talk to people about, like, what are they doing to get people engaged? Do we just do one-time volunteer opportunities? How do we change up the formats of our volunteer opportunities? So that's one of the biggest ones that I've been working on recently.
Yeah, there were definitely some of the same struggles with volunteers at the main library branch when I was interning there last summer. Just like having a consistent flow of people to help out with like the homework help center and things like that.
Yeah, and every place, if they have a low budget, needs to get volunteers, and so everyone's fighting for the same group of people who want to do things and want to go out and help out organizations and agencies. And so it's, how do you take care of your volunteers? How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them coming back week after week? How do you keep them from not shifting to another space and going to a completely another place? So it's a lot of give and take, but also making sure that they are committed to your mission, because just because they're there volunteering doesn't mean they get to do whatever they want. You still have to keep them moving in a certain framework that best represents your organization. So there's that give and take of moving them to do what you want them to do, but also giving them a little leeway so they're still enjoying what they're doing, and not, hey, I'm going to go off to this other place where I feel that someone wants me more. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Got a question from W. Taylor about what's a typical day for volunteers. It really just depends on what you're doing. The volunteers that I work with, I work at the Ohio Village, so it's an 1898 site, and so they would be in the village dressed either in time period appropriate clothing or just wearing a t-shirt saying, hey, I'm a volunteer, and engaging guests in that manner. So volunteer days look a lot like can look a lot like a paid staff day, whereas like depending on what they are doing. We have some who do research and records. We have people who come and work in our art department and they help make art pieces for us or like installation pieces. And so it just depends on what jobs they want to do and what jobs we need. It just depends on what the day looks like for a volunteer.
Yeah, sweet. So initially, like when you first started in your career, what do you wish that you like known already, like previously before?
First, I wish I knew how many weekends I'm going to be working. It's like if you work in museums, you work a whole lot of weekends, so that would have been really nice. I also wish I knew the competitiveness of museums. A lot of people want to work in museums, but there's not a whole lot of full-time museum jobs, if that kind of makes sense. So if like having to kind of figure out what space you fit in, build your resume to meet whatever the next full-time position that you're trying to get is, and kind of having a game plan, but also being ready for random opportunities that open up. So I think that was one of the things that shocked me the most was how few full-time positions are there and how much competition there is for those positions.
There's a question in the comments. Hold on. What are some of the types of jobs in the museum industry?
So I work in the education field. So my job is frontline education. That's what I've done ever since I've been in it now for 12 years. And so if you come to a museum, you're going to see either me or people like me and engaging with guests and talking about whatever collections we have in that museum. But there can also be marketing people, there's social media coordinators, there's people who are in charge of memberships and people you never ever see. There's our maintenance staff, we have people who develop lesson plans for all of our programming that we're doing. We have people who develop all the giant large-scale events, and so you only see them for the large-scale events. We have event planners where they're planning for weddings and any other conferences and any other things that can come in. So it's really a wide swath of job positions that are available in the museum industry. So it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm a museum professional and it's a one-size-fits-all type box. It's lots of various people show up in museums. So,
do you get to work from home now
only because
with quarantine?
of coronavirus. So previously it was be on site because we have guests coming and we have to engage our guests. But right now I'm doing a little work. I have a toddler as well, so I'm doing as much work as I can with a toddler. But just trying to get caught up on research, get a little bit ahead, and kind of game plan for what our potential summer might be, because the village is only open during the summer. So we're trying to figure out, all right, well, if we start when we were supposed to start, what is our staffing model and what does our plans look like? What do our events look like? Well, what if we start in mid-June? What if we start in July? What do all these models look like based off potential start dates? So a lot of it is kind of situational planning for possibilities that might or might not happen right now. But that's a lot of the museum industry is trying to plan, like, what are we going to see in the future? What are our guests expecting? What will our guests expect? We're trying to cater to a new potential audience. Well, what does that audience want? And how can we engage that audience to pull them in as well?
So in the library, there's like kind of certain steps that you do to like move up. Like when you initially come in, you probably work with the homework help center and then you become a shelver and you kind of move up from there. Is it the same with the museum?
For volunteer positions, very much so. We usually start out as like being a t-shirt volunteer and kind of figuring out, hey, what am I doing? And then you moved on me, and so I had to re-find you again. Then we have people who dress in third person, and so they portray a person from that time period, but they still live today. So they live in 2020, but they talk about and they look like someone from 1898. But we also have the next step, which is first person, where they are a person living in 1898. They act like a person living in 1898. They talk like them. They have developed a persona, a character of someone who is in 1898. And you don't just jump into being first person and doing that whole acting thing, because you need to have the rest of the knowledge of what does the 1890s look like, what's happened in the 1890s, before you can just jump in and pretend that you are a person in the 1890s.
Sorry about my cat.
Cats appear in Zoom meetings all the time.
Gosh, well, we finally got a cat.
Yeah, you've been waiting on one.
Yeah. So what are like some of the most important skills that you find that you need in your career?
So I think some of the biggest is patience for just things in the museums either move extremely fast or very slow. You never really know which speed it's going to move at. So you have to be patient on what speed you're going to be moving at. Adaptability. We had events after events after events planned out. We had an evening adult event. We had an open house type event. We had a women's suffrage event. All of these things have been canceled due to our current state.
Right.
And then we're having to rearrange those and move them back later in the year. So like a lot of adaptability. And the other one is just having really solid customer service skills, because you have, just like if you're working in a restaurant, you have guests coming to you and they have an expectation of what they're going to receive when they come to your site. And so you want to make sure that you meet their expectations, you exceed their expectations, and that you give the best possible experience to them, even if it's maybe slightly different than what they were expecting, but it's still a good experience.
Sorry, I'm reading the conversation. I'm trying to figure out Zoom right now.
All right.
Tiandra said, can you talk about how you got interested in the museum industry? And she would like me to talk about how I got interested in the library industry.
All right. I'll go first. So I heard some interesting commentary about like what people thought about history and learning history when they were younger and everything like that. Weirdly, I was similar. I didn't really like learning history in class. I remember I basically slept through my entire 8th grade year of history. I read the textbook in the first month and then slept because I didn't like how my teacher was teaching it. It didn't make sense to me. History to me is not about learning dates and all that sort of stuff. It's about how things happen and how they interconnect and why something happened because this other thing happened. It's about how things are cyclical and repeat themselves and learning from past failures. That's what history is to me. Not, hey, in 1906 we had the Food and Drug Act, and because of the food, we don't care about that. But knowing general time frames helps. But that's what I cared more about. And so I actually started out, I was really into math and science in high school. And I said, I'm going to go be an engineer. And I'm going to go work in aerospace engineering. My aunt and uncle both work for NASA. That was great. That was cool to me. And I spent a year in engineering and said, this is terrible. Didn't like it at all. Still like engineering. I still like space and rockets. So I decided, what can I do? History. I'm going to go be a history major and I'm going to study space flight and things like that. I even took Russian classes thinking I could go read the original Russian text of Russian space flight, and my Russian is terrible. I learned only a few words, but that's okay. But then just learning what history is and how we can use that to help inform our decisions for the future. So I stayed in history, got a minor as well in tourism science because I like the tourism industry, and merging those two together kind of fits. You have museums, you have tourism, you have history. I also got a teaching certification to teach 8th through 12th history. So I took all of that, kind of threw it together, and doing a student teaching semester, I said I never want to be in a classroom again, and started looking around what can I do? And then one of my friends had mentioned possibilities of working at a living history site that was nearby, and ended up in that. And I've been in museums now for about 12 years in various capacities. So.
Hmm. Sweet. Well, how I got interested in the library, I was with the program through Franklin County. I can't recall the name right now, but it was similar to Lead the Way, and like the way it helped students like with internships and just like other things like scholarship opportunities and things. Yeah, so I internship about 2 years ago at the main library, which I got to do a lot of different things. I got to work with marketing, and I got to shelve and help out the children's area with like puppet shows and stuff, which was kind of cool. And I found out that like to enjoy my work, which I found this out when I was like 14, and I'm very grateful for that. To enjoy my work, I have to have like a certain environment, and I really enjoy the environment that the library puts off. It's very chill, like everybody's very supportive and like helping people out. Like it's really sweet. And like just to find like young readers, like I was the exact same way, like being really excited 11 years old, like running into the library, and I get to find like kids like that and help them out and like offer books and suggestions and things to them. So that was really sweet.
It's a great space too. The main library is beautiful to
Yeah,
be
it
in,
is.
and just it makes you want to learn. So that's a great space.
Yeah. But with that, like I was thinking about like furthering my career in other places too. So what are like some things that helped you like, how can I put this? Like help you grow in your job? Like how do you keep leveling up basically?
I think always kind of having an eye on a few people who are ahead of you, kind of in their future. Like find someone that you appreciate their path, the way they've gotten to what they do. You appreciate their leadership skills. You appreciate how they manage, and like modeling a lot of your behavior after them, modeling like kind of their course a little bit. With museum fields, it's really weird because positions don't open up frequently, so you kind of have to hop back and forth across museums in order to kind of move up, but still having that pulse on a person that you want to emulate, I think is really useful, or even a multiplicity of people that you want to emulate. Just having that person that you can go talk to and say, hey, this is what I'm working at. This is what I want to be. How did you get there? What are ways you suggest? Like, what training courses should I go to? What certifications should I get? That's a big thing. That's just having that person that you connect with, who can help coach you and help train you. And also later on, when you are that person, make sure that you reciprocate that. Don't just be like, oh, I got there. Like, people appreciate you more when you are the helper as opposed to the person who's always being the helped, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's like a really good strategy. In 5 years from now, like as you keep growing, where do you see yourself? Like in a different position or like the same?
I still see myself like probably transitioning a little bit. I kind of see a gap that's happened at my workspace that I want to help kind of fill. So I'm working on like, is there a way that we can work on filling that and me moving into that? So my big thing is working with volunteers and engaging them. And we have our volunteer coordinator who works over the entirety. We have 68 sites, and she's in charge of coordinating a lot of those. But we have a bunch of people in our specific group and trying to pull all those together, because we have like 3 or 4 different people who work with those volunteers, but kind of trying to pull them in under an umbrella. So that way we don't have as many people giving different pieces of information to our volunteers, and we can streamline it. And so just seeing where gaps are that I would fit into, and seeing if that's a position that can either like morph into that position, if that kind of makes sense, because positions are adaptable. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, and like things change, people move on, and instead of like just refilling that position, oftentimes one position is moved into a different position slightly, or someone else takes a little bit of roles and you take some other roles and a new position opens up somewhere else. That's more likely to happen in the museum field than, oh, so-and-so left, let me fill that one for one.
Right. I think that also is like a good space to be in. Like, you don't have to feel like you're replacing somebody, just that like you keep improving constantly for you to have a higher position in the museum. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I don't want to much time. I think it has been 20 minutes. Tiandra, has it? Sorry?
Yes, ma'am. You're right there. Perfect.
Okay.
Right with that. All right. That was great. Thank you, Trinity, for facilitating that. We do
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
No
Josh,
problem.
I actually want to engage you more in explaining what, so we understand the state that we're all currently experiencing, right? And that things are, I guess, will potentially change.
Yes.
Or be postponed or more. But what is the vision for potential positions for AMP youth who are interested in these careers? And I know it's not just someone who's necessarily interested in the museum industry, but we've talked about so many different industries and roles, and then also building certain skill sets. So can you talk to that and then what it could look like?
So, like, initially in our conversation, I was trying to figure out how to get more people in Ohio Village during the summer because our volunteer base is dropping. So how do I get more people into the village? And so that was the initial conversation I was having with Tiandra. And she mentioned that you have paid internships. And I was like, well, great. This is a potential option of how we can get people to be in the village. And okay, so then I was trying to figure out what that would look like. And I think it was like a 6-week internship is what you have. And really the thought process I had was we can use this as a teach more about like customer service skills in a very different segment of the workforce, like where you can learn how to work with general populace and learn those customer service skills, but also you're learning what we call interpretation, where you're taking a concept, an idea, and you're translating that into something where people of the present day understand. And interpretation can be used for any skills, any field, really. If you go in and you go to an engineering firm and you find that one engineer who can talk to people and they can translate this crazy idea where the engineers are all in one room and they're talking about this big idea that no one else really quite understands, and you have the person who can go to the people with the budget and the money and explain, this is why we're doing this, this is what we think will happen. Being able to take your information and translate it to make it understandable and relatable to the larger populace is beneficial. If you're a scientist who's looking for grants to fund whatever research you're doing, if you really anything where you can take and transfer your ideas to make it understandable, that's the goal.
Right, because this is about strategic communication, right?
Strategic communication.
So, right, so we're really big on how important entrepreneurial skill sets are important, regardless if you're going to be a traditional entrepreneur or not. You should be able to pitch someone on a concept or idea strategically in order to gain whatever resource that you're looking for or buy it. And so this is an opportunity to build a skill set to be able to strategically pitch, articulate, communicate a concept to various audiences.
And our audience could be anywhere from a little 2-year-old showing up to a 100-year-old. And so you never know what audience is going to be showing up that day. So you have to be ready at any given moment. And the same thing happens in the business world, where you don't know when your opportunities are going to happen. If you're an entrepreneur, you don't know when someone's going to walk in your door, and that's the person you need to be partnering with. And that's going to be the person that makes your product big. You never know when you wake up what's going to happen. We had the what does a work day look like for you question on here. And that's the thing about my work, is I never know what my work day is going to really look like. I have a guess of what it could look like that day. But in most job fields, you don't really know what your work day is going to look like, because things pop up, new things happen, and complete transitions and turnarounds can happen in the same day. And so that's a lot of the skill set that I think learning how to do interpretation or strategic communication is really useful. Is where you can put that into play.
Thank you. And so various careers that we talked about that this skill set would be beneficial for somebody to not only build, but also be able to articulate on like a resume is, we said people that are interested in the arts, like acting, screen playwrights, even Broadway, like those kind of areas, but then also educators.
Yeah.
Because are you able to relay information to your class, right? And then also, what else did we talk about?
I still think
educators,
useful for business, useful for anyone going into anything where you think that you're going to have to talk to people. Like, it's a beneficial skill to learn of how to properly communicate what information you want to convey.
And you've had actors before, right? People who come in and are like, oh yeah, I'm getting the character for this.
A lot
that
of living
build
history,
that skill set.
a lot of living history people, like, if you get an actor, you can teach actors how to do things. I worked at COSI before this, and it was always interesting because a lot of the education team were people who were actors, because you can tell an actor what the script is, and they can go in and they can put on a whole show about what the script is, and they're ready to go. Now, if you get a scientist, they know more deeply about that information, but sometimes training a scientist to be an actor is harder than training an actor to be a scientist, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it just made me realize, like, this is a great skill set and experience for someone who's interested in working for Disney World. Or, like, right? Like, you can literally figure out how to be Princess Tiana or Jasmine, or like, this is that skill set. Like, oh, I know how to do this, and trust and believe I'm the best.
We have an event called Storybook Village that happens, it's supposed to happen in early June this year, where we literally have people dressed up as storybook characters, and 2,000 to 3,000 people come out and meet storybook characters. So similar concept to that, but it's actually a kickoff with the library for when they have their summer reading program. It starts as they had their kickoff, and Storybook Village is part of that kickoff as well. So like, we have strategic partnerships with the library for things. We have partnerships with, when COSI was going to have their science festival, we were having a partnership with them. Like, that's, museums try to do strategic partnerships around any place they can get. So
yeah, that's cool. Let's see. I don't see any other questions in here. So maybe if anybody has any other questions that they're thinking of, and coaches throughout the county, if you have certain questions about how your young people can be in position for these types of roles in the summer, I think is great. So we have somebody ask, what is the expectation for compensation for working in the museum industry, I'm assuming? So
compensation expectation, if you are a full-time museum professional, usually starts in the low 30s, sometimes lower into the upper 20s, depending on what the position is. As you move into more like marketing positions and things like that, they're compensated higher for that. But definitely, if you're working in nonprofits, you're not going to be making as much as if you're working in a for-profit entity. I assume the same thing at Lead the Way. So that's, yeah, nonprofits, that's traditional. It's going to be a lower compensation expectation. So
I actually would say that that is a common misconception. I think that that's changing. Because
people are trying to change it, but a lot of times, at least in museums, it's not happening quite yet. So
with those positions that you're naming, the 20 to 30 range incoming, is that required college degree?
So for the education positions, that's the ones that I know specifically the price ranges for. Most of them do, yeah. So
Okay.
that's one thing you do have to make a decision on, like, when working in the museum field, is like, is this something I want to do? Did I pay for school? Can I do this? So that's a definite decision that has had to be made of like, what are you looking for?
And I assume that there would have to be a wide range, because I think of some of the like the fancy, right, museums, and like especially like art museums and curators and things like that.
Well, that's for like curators and things like that. If you are, that's a higher staff. Like I'm talking intro positions. So, someone asked about, and an email popped up, like technology opportunities, virtual reality, fabrication, graphic designs. Those are also positions that are available, and those are going to be paid at a different compensation level that more closely matches what you would make in a for-profit. Because museums understand that they have to get good quality people in those positions, but museum education, there's not a lot of other places museum educators can go other than back into the teaching field, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay. All right. If we don't have any other questions come in, the last two things that we like to end with is one key takeaway. What's one key takeaway from this opportunity to speak with us, with our young people, that you would want everyone walking away with? And then the second one is a book recommendation. So at Lead the Way, we're doing our best to build like our own Lead the Way Learning Academy library. And so a book recommendation that either is directly correlated with your industry or just helps you along your path. But before we get to those, we have one more question. Trinity said, what are some of the things paid volunteers should expect as far as responsibilities?
Confused as to paid volunteers.
I think she's saying if she came through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if to work during the summer, so your position, if you were to work as an interpreter in the village, it's usually about 10 in the morning till about 5 in the afternoon is when we're open to our guests. But you're going to be either wearing a t-shirt saying you're an Ohio Village volunteer, or you're going to be wearing clothing as if you are in that time period. But since you are going to be shorter term, you're going to be representing still, like, I'm from 2020, but I'm dressed as 1898, so people can see what it looks like. But then talking about what it looked like in 1898, what were people going through? What were the politics of 1890s? What were the social reforms that were happening in the 1890s? How did people live? How did people cook? How did people survive in the 1890s? And so talking to any guests that come through, whether it's we have a day where we just have like 30 or 40 guests because no one came out because it was rainy, or other days we have 200 school kids come out. It just, every day is a different day when you're working in frontline museum industry, because you don't know what paying group is going to be coming through that day. So, but really you're staffing a space to talk about that time period and what it represented and what it looked like and how people can connect to that. So.
Sorry, I was living in Mahogany. I hadn't got to meet her before, so it's just exciting. Thanks for explaining that. So yeah, the two questions, we're just gonna do kind of rapid fire. One is key takeaway, two is a book recommendation.
So key takeaway is, I think one of the big ones for me is finding that key person who is ahead of you. I really want to harp on that, is finding that person that you appreciate their career path and you want to emulate their career path. Maybe not do everything that they've done, maybe switch up some things, but you appreciate how they have moved and how they are as an employer, how they take care of their employees or whatever that looks like, and emulate them and just build that relationship with them so that you can go, if you're having an issue about something, you can call them up and say, hey, this is a skill I want to work on. I recognize that you're really good at working with XYZ, and I want to be like that. And so building that relationship. Had a conversation with one of my colleagues who, as a manager, even if you're her best friend or she doesn't really like you, she treats you the same at work, like across the board. And that's really difficult sometimes for a lot of people. And so that's one skill that I've found that I want to emulate from them. And so we're going to be sitting down here in the next, when we actually get back, and like, how do I as a manager emulate that skill? It's like, if I'm not really happy with you that day, how can I still kind of push that aside and treat you the same as the person I'm best friends with, if that kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. So have that. Book recommendation has nothing specifically to do about the museum field. I also worked a lot in the park ranger industry for a while. So it's called The Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv. It's basically the concept of, hey, we have so many people leaving nature and pulling away more into urban environments and forgetting about nature. And so just kind of returning us back to getting out and appreciating nature, being part of the natural environments, and just understanding like how we are connected with nature. So that's probably my book. I'm gonna type it in for you though. Make sure I spell his last name right, because it's a weird one. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I heard you say Richard, but I was like, I didn't know what the last name was.
Louv, I think.
Okay, we will look that up. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everybody that came in. Hopefully all your questions got answered about the potential work experience with the museum and the museum industry. If you have any follow-up questions, just follow up with us and our team, and we'll make sure to get you towards Josh so that way he can further that conversation. Enjoy your Friday. Thanks for coming. Next week, we're between having someone who works in the auto mechanic industry and has their own business there, or someone that works in technology. So if you have a preference, make sure that you let your AMP coach know, or even go online to Instagram and DM us and let us know. But yeah, so thanks, Josh. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.